Why in the world would you buy a gaming phone over a flagship-like device? When carefully compared, gaming phones are just a marketing gimmick. Or are they? On a previous video, I commented as to how, as part of their international launch for their new phones, Nubia had sent me 2 of their new devices about to be released outside of Asia, a new flagship-like device and a new gaming phone. After one of them got lost in transit or something, I did this video answering your hot questions about the viability of gaming phones and just the overall problems of the Android game ecosystem. By far the most common question was, why would you buy a tacky gaming phone over either a flagship device or an ultra-value phone like the Pocophone? Thankfully for me, I finally received this, the Nubia C20, and this phone represents an actual opportunity to test and answer that question. Here's why I was so curious in the first place. Here are the 2 phones that I received. These 2 phones have the same quantity of RAM, they both have exactly the same SoC, the Snapdragon 855 Plus. They both have AMOLED screens at the same resolution, the same amount of RAM and storage on the base model, and price points that are close enough. So how are they different? Well, superficially, the Red Magic 3S has a substantially larger battery, which I get how that could be associated with gaming, but it is just a generally better thing to have. But you're interested in the big important changes, and we will have time to nitpick later, so let's get to the meat of the stuff. Starting with the cooling, one of the selling points of these devices is the presence of superior cooling that allows the phone to use the SoC to the max, and you can see that implemented on the Red Magic 3S as an active fan cooling versus the C20's regular all-phone passive cooling. This, again, in theory, allows for the gaming phone to run games at higher frame rates, which can be displayed at a higher refresh screen. I keep saying theoretically, because there's a couple of issues with this comparison. The first and most important is that the list of games that support high refresh rates on Android is, well, bigger than I expected, missing some of the heavier hitters like Call of Duty, PUBG or Fortnite, meaning that all the extra power seems to go underutilized, and this in general is a theme with Android gaming, where having a super high-end SoC can feel like overkill for what 99% of the games require. Interestingly enough, the game with unlocked frame rates that actually proved to be an interesting challenge was Minecraft, and this was a perfect test. Welcome to mobile gaming, where PUBG at 60 FPS is already done, but Minecraft is a benchmark. During my exploration of the 3S, I was fairly positive about the game space feature, where you could turn a switch in the gaming phone and replace your navigation bar for a widget that allows clock speed and temperature monitoring, with a couple of other useful features. I was surprised when I found out that the C20 basically has the same feature, just without the physical switch, which makes the Switch extremely silly now. But at least this will allow me to get some very accurate measurements. With all the effects turned on and the draw distance to the max, we finally start seeing the 855 Plus sweating, and after a bit of running with the Red Magic 3S and its internal fan blasting, you can notice something interesting. Even though both these phones have almost identical specs, the Red Magic 3S is coming out on top, and the active cooling is not keeping it any colder. In fact, the reason why the cooling is there is for the SoC to be able to use its maximum clocks. Notice how the 3S is able to hit much higher CPU clocks than the C20. Minecraft is a CPU bottleneck game, so you can see how the 3S is able to boost to a higher CPU. Interestingly enough, PUBG on its training mode is a better example. Both games hit 60 FPS, but as you can notice now, the cooling of the 3S is able to keep higher clocks on both the GPU and CPU, and in here lies the whole idea of a gaming-focused device. However, as I discussed extensively on my 3S video, for most games both of these phones are overkill, and I had to find specific cases to notice this, so performance is not really a good selling point for these. And after playing a couple of rounds of PUBG Mobile in both phones, I can tell you the big story here, at least for me, is not performance but rather controls. As I mentioned in my previous video, the Red Magic 3S comes with a couple of capacitive shoulder buttons that can be mapped to the screen, and the difference this makes cannot be overstated. By mapping frequent actions like aim and fire, and enabling gyro controls for precision, I finally start feeling comfortable with PUBG Mobile to the point that I just cannot go back. I can't stand playing a shooter on the C20 without the triggers, no joke. And I don't think I'm alone. The bigger story this month is the giant splash made by the release of Call of Duty Mobile. I'm very much casual to Call of Duty, so I was surprised when some of the creator friends who are very much veterans of Call of Duty seemed to have caught the mobile bug using gaming phones. So I decided to call my friend EposBox to ask him about his own experiences using gaming phones.
I'm Adam or EposVox. I run a tech education YouTube channel, videos, stream guides, things like that. I've been playing primarily Call of Duty Mobile on the Asus ROG Phone 2, which just came out. I received an early copy for review, still working on my review of it, but one of the notable features that it has over my normal daily driver, which is the Pixel 2 XL, which performs just fine in Call of Duty Mobile for like actual game performance, but one of the notable features that this phone has over the Pixel 2 XL are the concept of air triggers, which are basically like controller-like buttons on the side of the phone here, which you can then tap. And I have it set up. I've just accidentally started a magic gun game here, which you can then set up to basically be as if you were holding a controller. I thought I had one sitting next to me, holding a controller's triggers, and I have one mapped to aim down sight and one mapped to shoot. This is groundbreaking. I said the same thing when I reviewed the Red Magic Mars, which is another phone from Nubia. Playing games on the Asus ROG Phone 2 with these air triggers has me uninstalling games off of my Pixel 2 XL because the air triggers are that revolutionary in terms of your ability to control the game. You see, I've been a Call of Duty veteran since literally Call of Duty 1 on PC, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty 2 on PS2, Call of Duty 3 on Xbox. I didn't play that much, but then Call of Duty 4 forward, I was playing all the online multiplayer. And I had Call of Duty Mobile feels like a fairly basic, Call of Duty 4 mixed with some new elements. Gameplay-wise, it feels really good. It is a lot of fun, and it runs really well on most phones. But I spend most of my time fighting with the controls, and nothing's more infuriating when you're playing a game and you're losing or doing poorly because of the controls, because of something out of your, control, no pun intended, that you can't actually change. While I'd still prefer to play with a mouse and keyboard or full gamepad, having the actual triggers move to the side means I'm not tapping on the screen for every little thing. I can focus on moving and aiming, which is the primary mechanic you need to rely on in a first-person shooter, is where you're moving and where you're looking. I can focus my thumbs onto that and spend most of my time shooting and aiming with my fingers and not having to remove my thumbs from looking, which gives me a massive advantage and less of an advantage over other players so much as just feeling like I'm actually playing an enjoyable game. Now, the ROG Phone 2 specifically has a bunch of other things. It is extremely high-spec. It has something like 12 gigs of RAM, a really, really fast processor, and I have an overclocking mode I can enable if I need it. It also has a 120 Hz refresh screen. However, Call of Duty Mobile only runs at 60 FPS. It runs at it fine, so I don't need a whole lot of that extra stuff, but the extra power does allow me to use the built-in screen recorder, which does record game sound, unlike most third-party apps, to record literally every single match I've ever played in this game without any performance hit, which most phones like my Pixel 2 XL, the recording will be super variable frame rate and super low frame rate, and the game will, suffer in performance while I'm doing it. On this phone, I don't. If that's of interest to you, that's pretty cool, but otherwise it's purely down to controllers. And you can buy accessories that you strap on the side of your phone, which will do the tapping for you as if you had triggers, or you can connect a gamepad or a mouse and keyboard. So for a lot of people, this may be a moot point.
Okay, so I have raved about how adding buttons on the side of the phone could literally be the greatest benefit of this thing. So what is the C20 focus at? You probably saw this coming, it's the camera. If there is something I have learned from my past collaboration with TechAltar, is that what most people care about on a phone is the quality of the camera, both main and selfie camera, as long as they still get a big screen. This is why on tech/smartphone YouTube so many hours have been spent on discussing the different ways companies are trying to have a larger screen while still accommodating the camera. So, notches, holes, mechanical cameras that come out from inside the phone. This is a game that the gaming phone is not playing. It is limited to bezels with a regular old selfie camera and a single, okay but not sophisticated back camera. Cameras are not my specialty, but I can definitely tell you it's not extremely special. On the other side, the C20 plays this game hard. On the back, you will find a 48 megapixel main camera, a telephoto camera with 3x zoom, and an ultra-wide 16 megapixel camera. Alrighty then. On the other side, you will find a large screen and no camera. And this is when the nubia goes,
What about
the screen?
You've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second?
Screen. This phone allows you to use the main camera as a selfie camera using an entirely second screen hidden in the back of the phone. Okay, that's a solution to the selfie situation, I guess. It's kinda obvious that's where the budget for this phone went to, but still, it's very interesting how two things from the same company at the same price with the same specs could have such interestingly different focus. Let's run over some of the other important detailed differences before heading to the big conclusion where you can all yell at me at how I'm wrong to say anything good about mobile games. The C20 has one single speaker that inconveniently gets covered up when you hold the phone horizontally for a game, versus the two frontal stereo speakers of the Red Magic. Given how this is where the speaker tends to be on most phones I own, this is another minor advantage on a gaming-oriented device. Also, hilariously enough, the C20 lacks a headphone jack, while the Red Magic 3S has one. This is particularly interesting because when the trend started of phones shipping without headphone jacks, I still remember how part of the rationality was for allowing thinner phones, bigger batteries or so, and yet since these two phones are from similar generations and thickness, it now seems that it might have to do more about market segmentation. Somewhere, some marketing data is pointing out that people who buy flagship devices are just not using headphones, I guess. Kinda interesting how now being able to connect headphones could be seen as a gamer thing. There was a deliberate decision not to remove it here. And of course, there is how they look. While the C20 follows the trend of modern phones being all glass and all modern looking with curved screens and so on, although the back screen plate is a permanent fingerprint magnet that will just not relent, by comparison the Red Magic 3S is all metal with an RGB strip and more gamery colors. One of the comments you hear more often when discussing anything that has to do with gaming phones is the perception that they're regular phones with RGB, which is understandable, given the tendency of the mobile industry to rely on marketing gimmicks. But after playing around with these comparable phones, I'm leaving with opinions different than I expected. The supposed extra power allowed by the cooling is likely useful in cases like video recording, but in general, these top-of-the-line SoCs are disproportionate for most games out there, so that does not really make them super special. What's actually surprisingly a game changer are the physical buttons, which actually make a tremendous difference on shooters such as PUBG or Call of Duty, to the point that I'm no longer able to feel comfortable in a game without them. Hopefully, this means future generations will get a joystick or something, but it is by far the biggest reason why I will no longer play games on any other phone. In the end, we find ourselves in a similar conundrum to the last video. Heavy mobile gaming has evolved a great deal from the days of the exclusive casual gamer, with the dominance of PUBG Mobile, the introduction of Call of Duty Mobile, and a very complete port of Fortnite. For people who are already playing this game seriously, and there's a ton of those, phones with dedicated physical controls or cooling could be attractive for the right price, but it is definitely not about performance, at least not in the state of the current Android marketplace. What do you think? Are controls worth it on a phone? What could a gaming phone should have in your opinion? Let me know in your comments.